But yeah, I mean, I rewatched everything that what we did earlier, and hey, there we go. Looks
Ah,
like
there we
we
go.
are coming up. Okay, okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you. Okay, yeah. I was also getting the volume from the stream because I can this way I can see the chat. So,
Right.
uh, all right. Okay. So hello, welcome to the Sonic Cinema movie chat. My name is Brian Scuttle. You can find my written work at www.sonic-cinema.com. You can find the Sonic Cinema podcast on Apple, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify, and on the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. And you can also check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema, and coming up is the Atlanta Film Festival, and you're going to have some exclusive content there. But first, what we're going to do is, and we're going to get to the main crux of the story here soon, is I'm joined tonight by Matthew Saliba, and if you are familiar with that name, he is a filmmaker. He did a film that I watched several years ago called Eroticide, and he is, as I like to say, Sonic Cinema's resident kaiju expert. And we've had several podcast discussions on Godzilla and Godzilla movies, and we thought it would be fun to continue that conversation tonight with a dive into the Monsterverse as well as the recent Godzilla versus Kong. Thank you very much for joining me, Matthew.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on the show, Brian. Talking about kaiju is something I can't pass up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation as I always do. And before we get to that, though, a few sort of house cleaning things where so on Friday I had a couple of guest spots for podcasts get released on Nostalgia Cast. I was a guest, and we were talking about the Hal Needham 1986 BMX movie Rad, and you can find that wherever you download podcasts. And also, I was on the Film for Thought podcast, and we were talking about Richard Linklater's Waking Life. I've got a couple more guest spots coming up on podcasts in the coming weeks, and I will share those as they become available. As far as the Sonic Cinema podcast goes, we do have an episode dropping tomorrow, and it is one that I am really looking forward to. It's going to be the start of a new series at Sonic Cinema, and it's going to be called. It's basically going to be called Established Classics, and it's going to be with a friend of the show, Timothy J. Cox, and we're basically what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about three classic movies an episode. By classic, I mean I'm basically referring to the golden age of Hollywood from the 30s to the 1959 and 1960, and the and I wanted to share a clip of that podcast before we get started on Godzilla versus Kong for you to listen to.
Oh, there you are. There you go.
So that's just a taste of the discussion that Tim and I have in that episode. And the first episode, we are discussing three movies that it's hard to see three movies that are any more of quote unquote established classics than Citizen Kane, The Grapes of Wrath, and Casablanca. So that episode's going to be online tomorrow, and I hope you listen, and I hope you enjoy it because I'm thinking of making it a regular series. This was a really fun discussion, and I'm looking forward to having more with Tim on that subject in the future. So, for now, though, we are going to start proper in discussing Adam Wingard's Godzilla versus Kong. Although, correction, first, what we're going to do is we're going to watch the trailer because I want to share the trailer to if you haven't had a chance to see it yet to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. So here's the trailer for Godzilla versus Kong. Ah,
Yes.
that is. I was surprised. I forgot how much of that trailer for Godzilla versus Kong uh is from. Wait a minute. Hold it. I thought I got rid of that. Okay. I completely forgot how much of uh that trailer for Godzilla versus Kong has of the water battle between the two, and that it's funny. That's the first major action sequence with both of them.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would imagine that although I think they do have a few shots from one of the final ones when they're bathed in all
Yeah.
that neon light. That was actually one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
fights in the film. But yeah, they did use quite a bit of that, and but I think they wanted to show off. And I remember when I first saw the trailer to that, I was so happy to see fights in daytime because that's been
Yeah.
sort of the ongoing criticism of the Godzilla films about how a lot of the stuff takes place at night or in the rain. So it was actually nice to actually see the Titans fight each other. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of it?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. It was definitely it was funny watching it like well, actually no, because I didn't get to it until last week. But it was funny watching it after watching the original King Kong versus Godzilla from the '60s,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that. I love when these two get together. It's essentially a wrestling match,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
especially and even the action sequence at sea, you really get the feeling that these two are familiar with each other, that they know sort of how each other fights, and it's the adaptation of those fights in the context of where they're fighting that makes it exciting.
And it's funny you bring up wrestling because, as anyone who knows me on Facebook knows, that I'm a big wrestling fan. And it's well, yeah, in the original '62 film, there's definitely a lot of wrestling moves that go on, and I think that was actually deliberate when they were going over the fight choreography. But
Mm-hmm.
in the new one, and I guess we're going to kind of jump ahead, and I suppose we're going to talk about spoilers, right? I'm assuming should we
Yeah,
or
I mean
is
it's
that
it's
okay?
been it's been out for almost 2 weeks, so
Okay, fair enough. Because the ending of the film kind of reminded me of how booking works in wrestling. So, let's say you have two big superstars. Let's say someone like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, obviously,
mhm.
one of those two has to lose. And so when the person who does the favors, loses, what they do in order to protect that guy is have that person beat someone else. So he sort of saves face. So he looks good. And it's interesting because I don't know if I'm the only one who saw this, but as the way I saw it, Godzilla beat Kong in this movie. Like there's a decisive shot
Yes.
where his foot's on the chest and it's pretty over. And so, but
Mm-hmm.
then they have Kong beat Mecha Godzilla. And so that's the way they
Yeah.
sort of save Kong. And also because it's a Mecha Godzilla, well, maybe he did kind of beat Godzilla too. So it was interesting. Like, so yeah, it was just funny you bring that up because it did seem like a wrestling philosophy in that they had to make sure both characters got their time in the sun.
Yeah, when we've talked in the past about the Monsterverse and the new Godzilla movies, we haven't really discussed Kong Skull Island. And I mean, I think part of that is because we were focusing on Godzilla,
Mm-hmm.
and there's already plenty to talk about there. But also, it's interesting. Also, Kong Skull Island doesn't really fit in because of the fact that it's set in the '70s as opposed to modern times. It
Yeah.
doesn't really initially fit into what Legendary and all of the filmmakers are how they're establishing the MonsterVerse.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I thought we were going to go with what we liked about the film first, but yeah, I mean, this will sort of tie into one of my main criticisms of the MonsterVerse, and that is, much like the DCEU, or not to beat a dead horse, but some of the recent Star Wars films, it feels like
Mhm.
different directors were given different keys to the kingdom and told to make a movie. And well, by the way, we're going to send you this quick Cliff's notes on how they're all supposed to connect. And the
Yeah.
thing is, like, and now we can sort of look back on it now that the MonsterVerse is over. Looking back on it, it really seems like Godzilla 14 was a test, I think, to
Mhm.
see if Americans, first of all, forgave the Roland Emmerich version from '98 and were willing to invest in Godzilla again. And so,
Yeah.
so I think that was a test. It did well. In spite of
Mhm.
people's misgivings about the movie. And so then they sort of rushed into Kong Skull Island. And the thing is, like, okay, I guess Godzilla 14 was sort of meant to be a little standalone. So if Kong Skull Island's going to be the first part of this trilogy now, centered on like the Hollow Earth and all of that, it
Mhm.
just struck me as odd. Why would they set it in the 70s if for no other reason than to justify playing uh, Fortunate Son? It was just, you know what I mean? Because when you ask a
Yeah.
lot of people what their favorite film in the MonsterVerse is, it's surprising how a lot of people bring up Kong Skull Island. And I think the reason for
Yeah.
that was it had a great tone. It was a mix between
Mhm.
comic and action. You had characters that you actually cared about. You had a really, with all things considered, you had a pretty stellar cast in Brie Larson, Sam Jackson, Tom Middleton, and
Mhm.
so on. John C. Riley. Uh, and so it just makes me wonder, had maybe a little more thought been put into the construction of this universe. First of all, I would have never set Kong Skull Island in the 70s because right off the bat,
Yeah.
you're killing any chance of bringing these characters back. That was something that always
Mhm.
struck me as a little odd when I saw that. I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're getting an '80s Godzilla movie, or like we're building towards like the 21st century. So and it's a shame because I really think if those characters were sort of the main people that we stuck through from film to film to film, don't you think there would have been more of an emotional well, we would have maybe cared maybe a little more about what happens to the characters. And for example, like a scene where there's the deaf girl who can sign language with Kong. Wouldn't that have been
Yeah.
wonderful if we could have seen that developed over 2 movies or 3 movies instead of just shoehorned in, like, oh, by the way, she knows how
Mhm.
to do this. So, you know what I so, but I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. I mean, like, there was a lot to like about this movie. I love how zany and over the top it is. How it doesn't even try to dip its feet in any sort of realism whatsoever. I
Mhm.
love the idea of this hollow earth, this dimension that inexplicably exists at the center of our world, where all these
Yeah.
creatures come from. And again, that just made me think, like, wouldn't it have been great if the final film, The Monsterverse, was like Destroy All Monsters, where it was a big battle royal that took place in Hollow Earth with all the different creatures. But no, I mean, I loved how it went full tilt boogie with the insanity plot.
Mhm.
If anything, it really reminded me of some of the crazier Godzilla films from the '70s, where you would have
Yeah.
aliens comprised of hundreds of cockroaches and really oddball stuff like that. So in that respect, I liked it. What were some of the things that struck you about the film?
Well, before I get into Godzilla versus Kong, I do want to say one thing as far as what one of the things I did. You're right because of the fact that it is unfortunate that Skull Island is that in modern times because then you don't see any of those characters back. But
Mm-hmm.
rewatching it for the first time in a few years, I will say I did like the fact that when because of the fact that it's set like kind of at the end of the Vietnam War, and you have
Mm-hmm.
Sam Jackson's character who's basically a soldier who he's already gone through this war where basically the people who don't fight the war are basically screwing over the soldiers. You have him going into this situation where people above him are again putting him and his men into a situation where they're essentially going to get screwed over. And I actually kind of like that subtext of Kong Skull Island. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the important things as far as the Monsterverse though is that we do get some character uh, we do get some character continuity in from the Godzilla movies, at least with Ken Watanabe's character from Godzilla to King of the Monsters, and then Kyle Chandler and Millie Bobby Brown in from King of the Monsters over to Godzilla versus Kong. And I think the thing that I do appreciate about this movie is that it really does get to the point, and I think they kind of feel like, you know what, the first couple of movies, we have the slow burn of the 2014 movie, and then we get into it a little bit quicker in King of the Monsters. It's like now we can basically just wreak havoc from minute one. And I do like the fact that it's like we're sort of figuring out along with the characters as to why Godzilla is reacting the way he's reacting.
Yeah, and I mean, I do appreciate the and because this obviously separates it from the 98 version. I do appreciate the fact that, especially towards the end of the whole quadrilogy, that there is an effort to sort of create a mythology, that there's an effort to explain where these creatures are coming from. Because I think we had talked about this on one of the debates about how I had pitched an idea to make Godzilla for American audiences to sort of react to Godzilla the same way Japanese audiences would have reacted to Godzilla. Mm-hmm. That would have been to find a way to tie Godzilla into American history. And, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'd suggested that maybe they could have done something where they could have tied it into 9/11, where, America was attacked, and then they create this Godzilla who defends them and turns on them. And so, yeah, I understand like how maybe in the beginning they might have actually been trying to be a little serious, or maybe they're trying to ground it in a reality. But then by the end, you've just seen in the last film, you've seen like a dragon with 3 heads and a giant moth and a giant pterodactyl. So I mean, why not? Why don't all these monsters exist in that? I also really enjoyed too. There were a lot of little Easter eggs I found, particularly with King Kong, like the whole with Kong going down to the Antarctica to dig for Hollow Earth. That kind of reminded me of King Kong Escapes. I don't know if you saw that. That was
no, I haven't.
It was the other film Toho made after King Kong versus Godzilla. So it's okay. Kong. He's back, but like his suit is really ratty at this point, and so he fights Mechanicong, his mechanical double, and Mechanicong is under the tutelage of Doctor Who, but not that Doctor Who. So
okay.
So there was a couple of little. Speaking of which, I mean, I actually wouldn't mind. I mean, I know obviously the license with Godzilla is over, but I'm not sure what the situation is with Kong. But I'd certainly be up for seeing another Kong film. And since they've already remade Kong versus Godzilla, why not go with King Kong Escapes? But that actually reminds me of something else, though, because I think. I really enjoyed Kong in this film. The facial expressions, all the great job that I don't know. Is Andy Serkis still doing Kong?
No. This is no. I think this is entirely CG.
Oh, is it?
This isn't. Yeah, this isn't tied to any Peter Jackson's or anything associated. Right. Yeah, I mean, I do think Weta's involved in the effects, but it's not Andy Serkis doing any of the movements.
Oh, well, then that makes it even more impressive, because I mean, if that's just a 100% CG creation, I really enjoyed all the reactions and how we were able to relate to him. I think my only minor myth was Godzilla, because sometimes we get these close-ups, and I don't know if it was just me, but it seemed like the CG kind of overlapped a little bit. You never really seemed to get a good, clean look at Godzilla's face. Maybe it was maybe it's just because I'm watching all the old ones with my wife right now, because she's never seen them. And so I'm just used to seeing, all these guys in their rubbery suits, and they're a
Yeah.
lot more expressive, ironically, than the CGs. But no, I really enjoyed Kong's presentation in this film, and if anything, it made me wish there were more Kong films in this franchise.
Hmm. I'm curious to see if the success of this movie uh does bring Toho and Legendary back to the table to maybe continue the Monsterverse. I'm with you. I mean, I would definitely like to see more of Kong, and I like that I like that this feels as much of a continuation of Kong's arc from Skull Island than it as much as it is Godzilla from King of the Monsters. I like that they were able to bring those two story arcs sort of together, even though Kong Skull Island takes place 45 years in the past.
I haven't had a chance to read it, but I think there's a novelization of Godzilla King of the Monsters. And there is a
Mhm.
section that actually explains what Kong was up to the whole time, why we never saw him. I wish I should have looked it up before we went on, but apparently there was a reason why he was busy. He had
Yeah.
other plans that night, but yeah, and I'm trying to think. There was something else I wanted to bring up too. Oh, yeah. Another thing I brought that caught my attention was the score in the film, because
Yes.
there were certain instances where I thought I was watching Drive for a moment because of the electronic score. There was because
Yeah.
that really caught my attention because Godzilla has always been associated with very orchestral music, and so just to hear something like that really shocked me. I don't know what did you think, being the musician and all.
I honestly I really love the score for this one. I mean, I think Andre Alexander Desplat's score for the Gareth Edwards Godzilla for the 2014 movie is still my favorite in this franchise. But so the composer's Tom Holkenborg, who also did Zack Snyder's Justice League as well as Mad Max Fury Road. He's more well known by his stage name Junkie XL, and so I loved his score for this. I thought it really brought it really captured the energy of what we're seeing on screen, and it really does establish really strong themes for both Kong and Godzilla, to where when they're separate throughout the film, it's they each have their own voice, but when they're together, it comes together, and he just knows how to score action really well.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the score in this, and another thing that kind of struck me too was the length of the film, because most of these have been clocking in at north of 2 hours, and I think this one ended up being maybe about an hour and 50 minutes, which for me is still a little too long for a kaiju movie. But I mean, I guess as far as the American ones go, it did kind of zip by pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
where did you end up seeing the film? Did you watch it in theaters or at home?
No, so my wife and I watched on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
We're she's not quite ready to go back to the theaters yet, but yeah, I mean we've got HBO Max, and so yeah, we just decided to watch it there, and the first time. But I do want to see it on the big screen, as movie theaters start to as some movie theaters start to reopen in Georgia. I absolutely love this movie from a visual standpoint. I love the action in it, and I would love to see it on the big screen.
Well, because a friend of mine, we went to go see it in IMAX, and it played in front of a sold out crowd of 60 people. Well, obviously, for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
but no, it was really nice seeing it on the big screen. Just because, like, up until now, I've
Mhm.
been watching movies on my laptop and TV, so it's just to see it on a big screen after so long was just
Yeah.
it was a little bit of surreal actually to see it, but it definitely made all the difference in the world, and I might try and catch it. Once we finish like all the original ones, I'm gonna watch some of the newer ones with my wife, and we'll probably eventually get to Godzilla versus Kong, and we'll sort of see
Mhm.
which one we prefer more. I mean, I mean, it's hard to compare the two because obviously, I mean, if we're looking at it from a technical standpoint, I would imagine that the new one probably looks better. But I
Yeah.
mean, and this kind of now we sort of get into a debate about what you really consider kaiju, right? Because now I feel like kaiju has become this carry-all term that is used to describe any sort of giant robot or giant monster movie, whereas when it first started, it referred to something very specific. People in suits,
Yeah.
miniatures, and that. So I mean, I'll concede. I'll call Godzilla versus Kong a neo kaiju film, but it's in the well, how they would, how there's like film noir and neo
Yeah.
noir, but
Oh yeah.
no, and again, I'll say the same thing that I said when we talked about King of the Monsters. Again, like I love the original Godzilla films, but I'm sure if you talk to all those technicians, if some of them were still alive, and if you took them to see Godzilla versus Kong, I would imagine that that film is probably what they wanted to make,
Yeah.
but given the
Yeah.
limitations of their technology, they made what they did. Which, I
Mhm.
mean, for someone who doesn't have an appreciation for that, they might just laugh it off. But, if you've ever made a film or composed a score or did anything artistic, there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into that with forced
Yeah.
perspective and certain angles and everything. So, it may seem like the new film probably was harder to make, but I would venture to say that probably the 62 one was probably harder, just given what
Mhm.
they were up against. So I don't know. I mean, everyone, nowadays in society, everyone has to try and pick sides. For me, it's like, look, I love that the 62 one and the 2021 exist. And, if the 2021 helps a younger generation discover the older one, I'm
Yeah.
all for it. So I have no beef against the newer films.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And yeah, as somebody who watched the 62 for the first time, it's like I appreciate that for what it is. And you also recognize that you're not going to get the same level of quality, and you're going to get different elements of entertainment that come out of that. Like
Mhm.
Kong shoving a tree trunk into Godzilla's face in the 1961 2 one is hilarious.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, for
it's
sure.
it's it's absolutely hilarious. And
Mhm.
I there is something to be appreciated about those because of the fact that it's people in rubber suits who are trying to bring they're doing the same thing like Andy Serkis did in the Peter Jackson film, where they're bringing characters to life. I mean, and that's all. And really, it's like that's one of the things about performance capture that is so impressive is the fact that it's like it's just another layer of makeup. It's another evolution of makeup, of costume, in terms of bringing a performance to life. And no, the 1962 King Kong versus Godzilla is really entertaining to watch. And you can't compare you really cannot compare like what you got out of those movies compared to what you're getting out of these movies. Now, granted, I mean, I do think one of the things that's interesting about these movies is, especially Godzilla versus Kong, because I do think Adam Wingard was able to bring one of the things I kind of appreciate about this, especially in the action sequences, I felt like he was able to bring an element of those older Godzilla and Kong movies in terms of the tactile performances of the characters, especially when they're fighting each other to life. And it's like one of the things that I noted in my review that I really kind of appreciated. It may be just something that I noticed, but I feel like probably other people may have noticed it too. It's like, we saw that scene in the trailer where Kong is basically jumping off of the carrier because Godzilla is shooting it from underneath, and it's like all I could think about is John McClane jumping off of the Nakatomi building in Die
Yeah.
Hard. You know, there's
Yeah.
a scene when there's a scene in their fight in Hong Kong where like Kong is basically he's climbed up one of the buildings and is basically hiding from Godzilla and basically doing a sneak attack to him, and I couldn't help but think of Predator. And then of course when that final sequence with Arnold Schwarzenegger and I mean, I have when King Kong comes in for the final fight with Mecha Godzilla, you know, and King Kong he puts his shoulder back in place. It's like that is absolutely Martin Riggs from Lethal Weapon for me. That's all I see in that sequence,
Oh yeah.
and I love those little beats that really help humanize the characters, and the fact that he built those into action sequences that we can root for from a just pure action escapism uh front, because I love all of the action here. I think the sequence at sea with them is just really impressive how they do it. I don't understand the physics of how both of them can get on a carrier, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's just really entertaining to watch those two together. And then I mean, you have to have at least one sequence where they're kicking the crap out of each other in a major city.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And that was the thing too, because I think with all the neon lights, I wouldn't be surprised if that was like a tribute to because there was a Godzilla versus Mothra film in the '90s, and like the
mhm.
big climactic sequence takes place at night with these neon Ferris wheels, and it sort of reminded me of that a little bit. No, I mean, like as far as like out of all the four films, I'd say it's probably the most satisfying one, just simply because
Yeah.
maybe because they knew this was the last one, so we're just gonna go all out, and we're
Mhm.
just gonna assault you with all these awesome scenes that don't make any sense, but they're who cares because it's a lot of fun. Um, I'm just trying to think. There was something else that I wanted to bring up that came to mind. Um, well, yeah, I do think that the human characters in this film they were drastically cut down. I think from King of the Monsters. I think you're
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
following Rebecca Hall's character, Alexander Skarsgård, and then there's the army, and then you've got the oh, that's true. You've got yeah, that was something I missed too because Charles Dance never technically died at the end of King of the Monsters, so I was kind of hoping
No,
to be back as the particularly when you because at the end of King of the Monsters there's an end credit sequence where he
yeah.
discovers King Ghidorah's head. Oh, that's something else I wanted to talk about. So again, like just talking about how crazy the movie is. So the way they power Mecha Godzilla Mecha Godzilla
I was
is
gonna
that
ask you how you feel about how they did Mecha
oh
Godzilla in this one.
well, I mean, Mecha Godzilla changes so much. Like, I mean, yeah, when he was first introduced in like in '74, it was actually a really cool introduction because like you see Godzilla destroy a city, and then like another
Yeah.
Godzilla shows up and he blows fire, and then the skin peels off, and you see the metallic and that. So like I mean, considering that he was originally of alien origin, and then in the '90s he became sort of like a mecha where people would pilot him to control against Godzilla.
Yeah.
I mean, it's America's spin on it. I mean, it didn't offend me in any way. I'm not gonna start a petition to get his origin story back. But no, I think the only thing I was maybe a little disappointed was not seeing Charles Dance back because he was so wonderfully over the top in King of the Monsters, and I just think
Yeah.
especially with some of the lines that the villain gets to say when he's introducing Mecha Godzilla, can you imagine someone of Dance's gravitas delivering that?
Yeah.
So I didn't have an issue. I mean, I thought Mechagodzilla looked as interesting and as cool as he could, given that it's all CGI. I mean, it's
Mhm.
worth noting that some of the newer Godzilla films they do employ some CGI, but it actually is still suitmation for the most part. So this was
Okay.
actually the first time seeing Mechagodzilla as a completely CGI creation. And again, I mean, I didn't jump for joy, but I didn't log on to 4chan and complain. So so I mean,
I,
I thought it was fun. I will say this though, it did kind of, the surprise was ruined, and because they announced their, because I was at an EB Games and they had a bunch of Godzilla toys in stock, and among one of the Godzilla toys they had was a Mecha Godzilla from Godzilla versus Kong. And then you think, well,
oh
wait a
man.
minute, this, no one's ever mentioned Mecha Godzilla before, so I guess that's the big surprise. But the one thing I wanted to talk about real quick, so I know we were joking about this in King of the Monsters about how, this is Godzilla v Kong, Dawn of Mecha Godzilla, and we were debating about how, would there be a moment like in Batman versus Superman, like someone says, take care of Mothra, and then
Yeah.
Godzilla, how do you know that name? There is a moment at the end of the film where, if I don't know if someone's tried to do this yet, but if someone wanted to get creative, they could. So there is a scene kind of similar to Batman versus Superman where Godzilla's got Kong pinned and he's kind of roaring at him, and then
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
roaring back. So if someone wanted to dub over the audio, make it, it almost feels like that was done on purpose, just as, because, well, I don't know for sure, but it seemed like it was done on purpose. So because everyone's going to end up doing that joke in their head, but I thought that was kind of
Yeah, and
fun.
I wonder if Wingard did actually have that in mind, because I mean I think he's savvy enough in terms of genre to, because I mean he's also known for Your Next, which
Mm-hmm.
is a really effective horror thriller, and he also did the Blair Witch reboot a few years ago, which I actually really enjoyed how he spun that, did a new version of that idea. It's no, I would be. It wouldn't surprise me if he did do that sort of intentionally
Mm-hmm.
to sort of to sort of imply that type of moment. But
Yeah.
I do like the fact that it's like, I mean, it was inevitable that they were probably going to have to
Yeah.
combine forces to, beat out another villain. And it's like, I actually did have Mecha Godzilla spoiled for me before the movie as well. I happened to see somebody on Twitter mention it, and it's like, oh well, there we go. But I tried. I'm good. I was good because of the fact that I didn't really understand the context of it until I actually watched the movie. I mean, as far as the human characters when this one, I mean, yeah, there is less of them, but I feel like they were used effectively,
Mm-hmm.
like in some of the best Godzilla movies I've seen in terms of the Toho ones and the Japanese ones over the years, where it's like you get enough character development to sort of get the relationships, and then you give them somewhat interesting things to do. And I feel like the most of the characters in this movie do have something interesting to do.
Well, yeah, that was the thing, because I felt like with the King of the Monsters, at least, I started losing track of who was who.
Yeah,
Whereas this one, like, you've got, again, like, you've got Rebecca Hall with Alexander Skarsgård, and then you've got the kids with I guess the Alex Jones type character.
yeah,
uh, so um, so yeah, no, I mean, I enjoyed the elements, and again, I just, maybe it's just being nitpicking, but I kind of, I still sort of stand by that. I wish these were characters that had been there from the beginning, and like,
hmm,
like the emotional journey would have been a little more satisfying. But then again, at the end of the day, the film's called Godzilla versus Kong, so I suppose that's probably what people are really looking forward to more than human
yeah.
subplot.
What did you think of? We sort of touched on it a little bit, but we didn't really talk about, what did you think of the Hollow Earth idea in this movie? Is there anything in the Japanese films that sort of is a correlation to it?
I'm glad you brought that up. Not necessarily. I mean, I would say maybe the closest thing that there is in the original films is that there's this place called Monster Island where all the monsters
Hmm.
live and interact with each
Oh
other.
yeah.
And I mean, like, I know in Destroy All Monsters, the 68 film, there is a scene that actually, now that I think about it, kind of reminds me of something from Kong, Godzilla versus Kong, where I think Godzilla tries to leave Monster Island, but there's an electrical force field preventing him.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that kind of felt like a tribute, like when they show Kong at the beginning and you think he's
Hmm.
back on Kong Island, but it's not really. So, I mean, at least in the original films, at the beginning, there was an effort to always explain that the monsters were either a result of atomic radiation or they came from space. Those were your two big
Hmm.
options. There was never, and then like in the '90s films, um, well, actually, there are elements in the '90s films that sort of correlate to the girl who is able to have a relationship with Kong, because there is a
Hmm.
psychic who shows up who has a similar relationship, who she can control Godzilla. But no, there was never anything like a Hollow Earth, and that's why I thought that was actually one of the best and really more unique ideas in the
Hmm.
MonsterVerse. And again, I just wish this was something introduced earlier, because
Yeah.
maybe Kong Skull Island could have been film one. Then there was Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla versus Kong, and then Destroy All Monsters. Once
Hmm.
it becomes abundantly clear we can't control all these people. No, I like the idea. I mean, I'm interested in conspiracy theories and such like that. So, well, at least not the ones that involve certain letters, but
Yeah.
but but I mean, like, but stuff like that, like, like, cause so there, there are theories about a hollow Earth and whatnot, and that it is
Hmm.
rooted in Antarctica. So it was interesting to see, and I like also how no one ever questioned whether this was real. Like, the
Yeah.
plan, Alexander Skarsgård's plan is we're gonna get Kong and he's gonna take us there. There's no doubt that there's a hollow Earth in Earth. It's just so. So no, I thought it was really interesting once they were there too. I thought it would have been fun to throw in some cameos, even if they were just like little
Yeah.
flashes of some of the monsters. But no, I mean, like, seeing Kong there, he had his big hammer, and that was a fun moment. And I mean, again, there's definitely room for other films. I mean, if they can't, because again, I'm not sure. I believe they only had rights for maybe 3 to 4 films. So I think, and I
Yeah.
think, I think the agreement was that while Hollywood was making their films, Japan had to wait for
Hmm.
Legendary to finish their run. So I think now that their run is done, Toho is going to start launching, I think, their own Monsterverse, where they're going to have
Okay.
like individual films for all the key monsters, and then I guess they're going to do like the MCU way, where they'll introduce everyone separately and then have a big melee.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I'm curious to see how this continues. I mean, if Toho decides that they're gonna hold on to the rights and they're gonna continue on with their movies, it's like I welcome that, and I certainly hope that even if Warner Brothers or some studios no longer making them, at least they can maybe work out in a distribution relationship to where we can get those movies here in the States. And I mean, because I would love to see like Japanese Godzilla and Kong movies like get big theatrical releases over here. It would be a lot of fun to watch a movie like that on as big a screen as you can.
Oh yeah.
And yeah,
Well, I mean, the last.
as far
Oh,
no, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so what I was gonna say is like I did enjoy the Hollow Earth concept, and it's like I was with you. I was sort of kind of expecting cameos that they would do like cameos of different monsters in there. I find it extraordinarily convenient that the human characters could breathe and didn't have to adapt whatsoever to Hollow Earth, and they're just fine.
Oh yeah.
That raises more questions than the film answers, and
And the thing
you
there's
know,
a thing about the gravity too, where
yeah,
when they're entering it. But I mean, I think there was a review somewhere where I think they had it peer reviewed by someone in science, and they were like, well, that couldn't happen. I think some of the
right.
gravitational forces, like, but I don't know. Like, I mean, at this point, that's a moot point. I mean, like
Yeah.
if that's the thing that's going to prevent you from enjoying this movie, then you're probably not the target audience for this. So
No, no, I would not say so. Yeah, and I mean, I am curious. You know, I just real like I said in my review. I mean, I think Godzilla 2014 is I do think it's probably the best movie from a quality standpoint, but I think Godzilla versus Kong is easily my favorite to watch. Like
yeah.
I just really thoroughly enjoyed watching it, and yeah, I think it's one. I think it's even more than King of the Monsters, because I mean King of the Monsters does get kind of bogged down by the human elements. I mean it's the longest of the Monsterverse series,
Mm-hmm.
but I think this is the one that kind of captures the spirit of some of the Toho ones that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
the strongest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they definitely remind me of some of the zanier titles from that original series, which is why I really enjoyed it. I think because we're still finishing the classic ones, so I want to show her
Mhm.
my wife all the classic ones before we jump into some of the newer ones. But no, I'm looking forward to rewatching all four of these in order at some point and just sort of reevaluating. But gosh, if I had to put them in any kind of order, I probably would say Godzilla versus Kong, Kong Skull Island, King of the Monsters, and then the Godzilla 14. But I mean, we've spoken
Mhm.
about why I wasn't terribly keen on
Yeah.
14. Not for just for the record, not because of the lack of Godzilla, because if you watch any Godzilla movie, you know Godzilla shows up at key points. It was just,
Mhm.
in retrospect, knowing that they only had so many films, that would have been the ideal.
Yeah.
But whatever. We got to see Bryan Cranston say Godzilla with all the bravado that he could muster. So I'm happy.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I mean, I would say just if you're talking about quality, I mean, because I did actually the day before Godzilla versus Kong dropped, I did actually do a back to back to back of the previous MonsterVerse movies, and I was, and it's funny because of the fact that it's like Godzilla 14 has actually improved with for me the more I've watched it. Kong versus Kong Skull Island, I like more than I did the first time. I'm still not a huge fan of it. I mean, there's still things about that I'm not really a big fan of,
Mhm.
but I mean, I think it's a different type of Kong than what you're getting from the original movie or from the Peter Jackson movie. I
Mhm.
mean, I think that's something that's interesting. I think that's something that's worth mentioning. It's not just we're going to remake King Kong again, but he's going to be in the Godzilla verse, and it's like I do like that. And then King of the Monsters, it does go on for a bit too long, but overall, I enjoy it because I do like the monster action in there with Mothra, with Rodan, and with King Ghidorah.
Mhm.
So
Oh yeah, no, and and again, like if this exposes a whole new generation to the older films, I'm all for
mhm.
it. I don't know what the future of American Godzilla films are. I mean, it does seem like every 10 or 20 years they kind of come back.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see what happens. I mean, I think
Mhm.
if they ever do decide to do something like this again, I think it would be good to get maybe one or two directors, or at least have like a creative an artistic director oversee the films so that there's
Yeah.
maybe a little more synergy between them. But no, I mean,
Mhm.
just as far as entertainment goes, they're a lot of fun, and I'm especially happy to see that Godzilla versus Kong. I think it just crossed 400 million worldwide.
Yeah.
which is actually very impressive considering the lack of theater space to
Mm.
be shown in. So we'll see, and I will say Adam Weingart really won me over. I remember expressing a lot of skepticism when he was brought on board because he was known for creating the mumblecore horror movement. So I was just
Yeah.
thinking, is Godzilla and Kong, are they just going to mumble to each other the whole time?
Yeah, I think we made that joke. Yeah, I think we made that joke when we were talking about King of the Monsters.
Yeah, we did. But no, he did a really good job, and I think now
Yeah.
he's been signed to do the Thundercats movie.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
yeah. So kudos to him. Again, sometimes it is these indie directors that you would never think of that end up doing
Mm.
some of the best work. So kudos.
Yeah, and if you're interested in any of the older Godzilla movies, I know that HBO Max does have some of them on there right now, and I believe the Criterion Channel has several of them too. And I mean, Criterion put out an absolutely beautiful Godzilla box set a couple of years ago that I still have not splurged for. I don't know, maybe the next 50% off sale I'll do it, but yeah, it's they're out there and they're well worth watching it, especially if you can watch the original Godzilla, the Ichiro Honda movie from 1954. It's tremendous. It is one of the best films I think I've ever seen. It really it sort of transcends the genre in the same way that the original King Kong does, but does it in a different way. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about that. And the other movies that bring in other monsters that I've seen are just fun. They're just fun to watch, and you kind of know what you're getting, and it's worth checking them out if you do enjoy the MonsterVerse.
Yeah, I would. Well, I mean, obviously, I would highly recommend checking out the classic films. They're all on the Criterion Channel except for King Kong versus Godzilla, but I mean, that's something you can
Yeah.
easily pick up on DVD. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
newer films, I'm secretly hoping Criterion ends up putting box sets out for the second generation that they did, and then the newer ones. Because I definitely
Mm-hmm.
think there'd be a market for it, and just think of all the great artwork we get out of that.
Oh
But
yeah.
I just wanted to say it's been a real blast talking about Godzilla all these times. We've done the podcast and now we've done this, and yeah, it's just sometimes you have all this knowledge in your head and you don't have an outlet for it. So thank you so much for giving me the platform for this, and I'm glad that your appreciation for Godzilla has gone up as well there.
Yeah.
Having had a chance to see some of the good and the bad films. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm not sure what's coming out in the pipeline yet as far as another Godzilla film goes, because I think the last Japanese one they made was Shin Godzilla. Which, if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen that, have you seen Shin Godzilla?
I've not seen Shin Godzilla, but I've heard excellent things about
Yeah,
it.
you would really, really like it. And we were talking earlier about how it's so rare to see a Godzilla film in a theater, like a Japanese one at least. I think
Yeah.
when I was in Toronto at the time, so it played there, and it was like a real sold out theater with like at least
Yes.
300 people, and yeah, that was quite a magical moment. So yeah, if you ever
Mm.
do get a chance to see something, even if it's Godzilla versus Megalon, it's worth going to see on a big screen.
Yeah, Godzilla versus Kong is. I know it's available on HBO Max until April 30th, and then it'll be in theaters as long as I guess as long as theaters have room for it, probably at this point, because I mean they're still gonna need they're still gonna need a product, and yeah, I definitely hope to see it on the big screen before it officially makes its way to streaming. Just period, and yeah, this has been a fun conversation. It's like when I when I first pitched this idea to you a few years ago, it's like I certainly didn't expect us to have like three or four different conversations about kaiju cinema and just Godzilla in general. But normally this would have been a podcast, but because of the fact that I've got my podcast laid out to where like my next available slots in May, I wanted to, you were the one who suggested, oh well, we'll do it as a live chat. It's like this was a lot of fun to do this. So
Yeah, it really was a lot of fun, and I think we spoke about this off camera, but it's so nice to finally see you in the
yeah.
flesh here, because usually for these podcasts it's audio, so it was actually
Yeah.
nice to actually see you and see your office there, and
Hmm.
good stuff. I mean, thanks for having me on, and yeah, we'll have to do this at some point in the next 10 years when when America gets the rights to Godzilla again.
Yeah, yeah, well, I'm sure there's plenty of things we can talk about in general before that happens.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, you and I have pretty good back and forths about movies. That I mean, I definitely because I mean we talked about Kurosawa and Leone last year,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of other conversations we can certainly have, but yeah. Matthew, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that'll be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat. Again, check out my written work at www.sonic-cinema.com. Subscribe to the podcast at Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, where you can actually hear Matthew's and myself's other conversations with Godzilla. And we also talked about Camera 3 Revenge of Iris for my class of 1999 series. And you can also check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. My next episode for the movie chat's going to be Thursday. I'm going to be talking to a friend of mine that I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. I had him on the podcast last year. It's going to be fun to have him on in this context. And for now, thank you very much for joining me at the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat. Hope you have a good night.